darkness comes.
I'd pretty much put this all out of my mind, but since it happened a year ago this month, I guess it's coming up in my mind again. Last summer I was set to move into a brand new apartment with 2 friends. However, due to some construction delays, our apartment was not ready in time, so the landlord offered to put us up in another building for a month, until everything was finished. That is how I wound up staying in this god-awful place. When I first toured through the apartment, I found it a little creepy, but since my roommate thought it was fine, I shrugged my feelings off as the result of the harsh fluorescent lighting and the fact we visited on a rainy evening. However, this feeling did not go away. Every moment I spent in the apartment, I could not escape the feeling of being watched. This uncomfortable feeling increased whenever I was alone, which was often due to the fact that both my roommates were working full-time, while I was still waiting for my internship to start. Lots of weird shit seemed to happen only when I was alone. Since we were only staying for a month, we never bothered to really unpack. By myself, I would hear things constantly shift and loudly rustle in the boxes for the full month I was there. Things would bang in the cabinets, fall off tables, and this would all stop as soon as my roommates returned. At one point, our recycling began rustling and banging so loudly, I was convinced there must be a mouse in it. But upon finally dumping it out onto the floor, there was nothing there. At some times, I would become so overwhelmed by the constant and increasing noises that I would simply leave the apartment and sit on the front stoop. The worst moment came when I was getting ready to go out and heard something knock clearly and loudly 3 times on my dresser. I left immediately. Up until that point, I had kept my feelings to myself, not wanting to disturb my roommates unnecessarily. However, that night, I texted my very skeptical mum friend roommate to ask if she'd heard anything weird in the apartment. To which she responded, "Yes, it's the only time I've ever thought maybe there's a ghost." After that, I stayed with my boyfriend for the remainder of the month, and returned only every few days to get fresh clothes, leaving as quickly as possible. I know this all sounds rather tame compared to the things posted on this sub, but I've truly never experienced the kind of dread I felt every time I entered that apartment. I have lived in 11 different houses and apartments, and never once felt uncomfortable on my own. It is a terrible thing to feel afraid in your own home, or like your sanity may be slipping away from you. I honestly pray I never wind up stuck somewhere like that again. I currently go to school at a private school, and it is split into 2 buildings. One is an old train station, and the second building was a paper press building or something like that. My school buildings are very old. They were made in the late 1800s to early 1900s. The owner of the paper press building had a brother, and a few years before the school opened in 2012, he had gone into the elevator, and the elevator had fallen and he died. When the other building was still a train station, 2 people had died from the train. One was a suicide, and the other was an accident. This is my first year at this school, and I'm currently in the 9th grade. I always have to go into school around an hour earlier than school started because of my mother's work. There is only one teacher there when I arrive at school. Every morning I always hear a tapping on the window. At first, I would think it's a tree. Then I would realize that there aren't any trees around the windows. One night I was at my friend's house, who lives a mile from our school, and at 2-3 in the morning, we decided to go for a walk. We went to the school because we had nowhere else to go. We were just sitting at the table behind the school, and all of a sudden, every window that we could see, there was banging coming from it. This was enough for us to run home and not look back. In the paper press building, sometimes if I'm there in the morning, I will hear an elevator moving. Then the door opened, and then footsteps coming from upstairs, coming down. Upstairs used to be a bowling alley, and I was there with my teacher catching up on work, and we both heard bowling ball banging and rolling. When I go to school tomorrow, I'll try to get photos, but the elevator is locked up and the bowling alley is also locked from the inside. This happened when I was around 12 or 13 years old. Taking place during the winter, my state was under a severe blizzard emergency. It was snowing like crazy, but my friend and I didn't really care, and wanted to take advantage of all the snow. So we decided to go outside, and went to a nearby elementary school playground. From what I remember, the snow was really coming down hard, but we were having fun. The school itself was closed. There wasn't a single car in the parking lot. Looking through the windows, the school was clearly dark and empty. But then, out of nowhere in the distance, a lady suddenly appeared, staring out a window. At first, I didn't think much of it, because I figured that it must have been an employee or a teacher. But like I said, the parking lot was empty, and the school was dead. So it didn't make sense for her to be inside the building. But I just ignored her and continued hanging out with my friend. About an hour went by, and when I looked back at the school, I could still see her staring out the window. She hadn't moved at all. She was like a statue. So, just to make sure I wasn't seeing things, I decided to walk towards the school to get a better look. I ended up getting super close to the window that she was staring out of. I could still see her, clear as day. I actually waved at her to see if I could get her attention. But it's like she didn't even see me. It's like I didn't even exist. She was staring into blank space. I then even tapped on the window and still nothing. The closer I looked at her, I knew something wasn't quite right. I got the chills. I still get the chills even thinking about it. I then yelled over to my friend to get his opinion on this mysterious lady. And when I turned around, she was gone. Completely vanished. Fast forward a couple of days later. In a nearby neighborhood, my friend and I actually knew a lady who was a teacher at the school. I told her about seeing the lady in the window. She looked so confused. She said in a really suspicious manner, "There was a lady inside the school?" She then explained that due to the blizzard, that the school had been locked down for over a week, and that there was no reason that any teacher or staff member should have been inside the building. So, till this very day, the lady in the window is still a mystery, and I'm convinced that she was a ghost. This happened last year, probably days or weeks before the pandemic started in China. I've always had problems with sleeping, even with prescriptions to help me stay asleep are pretty much useless. Dead time around 2 to 3 a.m. In my dream, something kind of whispered in my ear, "Wake up, somebody's here." It felt like a bolt of lightning struck my spine that made me sit and look at the door immediately as soon as I heard the words. A little girl was standing next to my husband who was sleeping, with a hue of ghost, if you ever saw one. Smoky grey, transparent but 3D. She began to float towards the foot of the bed, as to walk. She stopped where the foot was. I couldn't barely see her face, but the details of her hair and the collar of her dress was clear. I know I have poor vision, especially at night time, but I can see her in the dark. She doesn't have a face, which I find strange. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She grabbed my left ankle hard, forcing me to kick her with my right foot in fear. But then I woke up with me thrashing. It was a dream. Never have I seen this girl before, mind you. I told this to a friend of mine who is an empath. I showed him the sketch of the faceless child that I drew. I usually draw the nightmares I've had. Sam was quiet. Minutes later, I called. "Try not to freak out," he said. He sent me a pic of his deceased wife when she was only 8. Same haircut, same dress, same chubby cheeks. He has been quiet because he was busy looking for his wife's pic that is similar to my sketch, hidden somewhere in his boxes full of her pics. I burst into tears, confused. I was freaking out. I met Sam 5 years ago. He was already a widower when I met him. I don't know why I cried, but I know I was furious, asking myself, why me? She could have done this to her husband. I don't know what she wants. I'm not flirting with her husband either because I'm happily married for 10 years now. I don't know why she made contact with you. She's a good woman, trust me. I think she was trying to warn you about something, he said. Then, weeks later, Sam told me that he needs to move out of the apartment again. He was saddened about it, but he doesn't have a choice. Maybe that was the warning. The question was left unanswered. Why me? Why not him? He's in Canada. I'm down south in the US. It's not like I can save him as soon as possible. I know my experience will not end here. I will carry this curse for as long as I live. Just a little info on where I lived in Japan. I lived on a small island south of mainland Japan called Okinawa. My dad is military. The entire island is haunted, mainly the military bases, including the housing. Now, I'm only going to mention the strange encounters I had. I was the only one in my family that experienced things as well. One night around 2-3 a.m., I had randomly woken up on the couch. My brother and I often fell asleep in the living room on weekends. It was pitch black. My phone had died. I couldn't find the remote, and I was terrified. I sat in the darkness for a bit, waiting for my phone to charge. Then I heard this loud thud, like something plastic had been dropped from the ceiling. 2. This is one of the most terrifying things that happened. My parents and brother were going out, meaning I would be home alone. Before they left, I would hear the chairs at the table move around. I went downstairs to check it out. But they were the same. I brushed it off like it was nothing. Then I was sitting on the couch, and I had this weird feeling that something wasn't right. I looked into the doorway to our kitchen and saw a figure move from the laundry room door to the doorway 3 times. I was scared shitless. I started crying. Called my friend cause my parents weren't answering. Then, about 10 feet in front of me, I saw a figure with no legs glide across the room and disappear. 3. I still can't explain how this happened. In my room, my bed was pushed against the wall, and I had a shelf 2-3 feet above my headboard. On this shelf I had a lot of knickknacks like figurines and stuff, but I also had this cross stitch my mum did when she was little, sitting on the shelf being held up by 2 Funko Pop figures. Thursday morning around 3-4 am, I heard a loud bang. It had woken me up, but it was loud enough to wake up my mum as well. She came into my room and asked what the noise was from, and I shrugged my shoulders and went back to sleep. That morning, I found out it was the cross stitch from my shelf. It had slammed against my wall to the end of my bed. It didn't fall because the Funko figures were still standing, and it would have hit my head. The following 3 stories were given to me by a work friend of mine, who he got from his friends. They're only short, so I'm grouping them together. Okay, so I went to my cousin's house for Thanksgiving once. My uncle just bought this house in a historical area of the city. The house was around 250 years old. It had this really old and creepy cellar. My cousin and I went to check it out. There was one big room, and connected to those rooms were 2 hallways with even more rooms. 6. Each room had a big pile of ash and dirt in the center of them. One room also had a box of Christmas ornaments. So, it's creepy as fuck, and we go downstairs to have dinner. The door to the basement is in the kitchen, next to the fridge. I asked for water at dinner, and my uncle told me to grab a water bottle from the fridge. I opened up the door and I swear I heard something running up the steps behind the basement door. Straight up running. So I slammed the door and ran back to dinner and sat next to my mum. I told her what happened and she said, "All day I've been feeling like someone keeps putting their hand on top of my head." We were freaked out, but we planned to spend the night anyway since my parents were drinking. My cousin's room was huge, and the ceiling was really high. It had terrible wallpaper that they didn't take off yet, but it was peeling. As we were sleeping, a piece of wallpaper that was already coming off ripped down the wall. We both shot up and just looked at this huge piece of wallpaper hanging from the wall. I went to sleep with my parents and left the next morning. My uncle sold the house and moved out because my cousin kept complaining that it was too scary. I have 2 stories. These happened to my friend Deja. The first one, she was in a friend's house, and while her and the friend were going to sleep in the friend's room, they hear someone coming up the stairs. At first they think it's the friend's mum or something, but then they feel a presence at the door. The door is kinda open, like a crack, but they both look and there's a shadow there. My friend is like, "Mum?" No answer. So they turn on the lights to see what's going on, but the shadow is gone once they turn on the lights. The other one happened to my same friend after her mum died. So there was this lamp in the living room of her house that never worked, and they never knew why. After her mother's funeral, when she, her 2 sisters and her grandmother were at home, the lamp switched on that night. They had no idea why or how. The next day the lamp wouldn't turn on again, and hadn't worked since. Hello watchers and listeners. Thank you very much for watching. That was a compilation of ghost stories that didn't make it into other videos, but I had them saved anyway. I hope you enjoyed them. A big thank you to everyone who allowed me to use their stories. Links when available are in the description below. I'd like to take a moment to say a huge thank you to everyone who subscribed, shared, and helped support my channel. It's people like you who have really helped it grow, and I appreciate it so much. In the next following weeks, I'll be doing some collaborations with fellow YouTubers. I'm pretty excited about that, so look out for those. As always, if you have any stories you'd like to share on my channel, please send them to the email below. Thanks again. I truly appreciate you all, and stay safe.